spending hours in a conference room filled with files. If Maggie Rose had been taken from the site in Maryland, she could still be alive. There was still a slim chance. Sampson and I returned to Washington Day School one more time to interview some of the school's teachers. To put it mildly, most of them weren't overjoyed to see us again. We were still testing the accomplice theory. It was definitely a possibility that Gary Sinigi had been working with someone from the start. Could it be Simon Conklin, his friend from around Princeton? If not Conklin, then who? No one at the school had seen anyone to support the notion of an accomplice for Gary Sinigi. We left the private school before noon and had lunch at a Roy Rogers in Georgetown. Roy's chicken is better than the Colonel's, and Roy has those swell hot wings. Lots of zing in those babies. Sampson and I settled on 5 orders of wings and 2 32-ounce Cokes. We sat at a tiny picnic table by Roy's kiddie playground. After lunch, maybe we'd go on the seesaw. We finished our lunch and decided to drive out to Potomac, Maryland. For the rest of the afternoon, we canvassed Sorrel Avenue and the surrounding streets. We visited a couple of dozen houses and were about as welcome as Woodward and Bernstein would be. Not that the cold reception stopped us. No one had noticed any strange cars or people in the neighborhood. Not in the days before or after the kidnapping. No one could remember seeing an unusual delivery truck. Not even the usual kind, utility repairs, flour, and grocery deliveries. Late that afternoon, I went for a drive by myself. I headed out toward Crisfield, Maryland, where Maggie Rose and Michael Goldberg had been kept underground during the first days of the kidnapping. In a crypt? In a cellar? Gary Sinigi Murphy had mentioned the basement under hypnosis. He'd been kept in a dark cellar as a child. He'd been friendless for long stretches of his life. I wanted to see the farm all by myself this time. All the disconnects in the case were bothering the hell out of me. Loose fragments were flying around inside my head as disconcerting as shrapnel. Could someone else have taken Maggie Rose from Sinigi Murphy? I couldn't have cared less if Einstein was investigating the case. The possibilities would have made his head spin and maybe straightened his hair. As I wandered around the grounds of the eerie, deserted farm, I let the facts of the case run freely through my mind. I kept coming back to the son of Lindbergh, and the fact that the Lindbergh baby had been abducted from a farmhouse. Sinigi's so-called accomplice. That was one unresolved problem. Sinigi had also been spotted near the Sanders murder house, if we could believe Nina Sarizer. That was a second loose end. Was this really a case of split personality? The psychology community remained divided over whether there was such a phenomenon. Multiple personality cases are rare. Was all of this a Byzantine scheme by Gary Murphy? Could he be acting out both personas? What had happened to Maggie Rose Dunn? It always came back to her. What had happened to Maggie Rose? On the battered dashboard of the Porsche, I still kept one of the tiny candles that had been handed out around the courthouse in Washington. I lit it. I drove back to Washington with it burning against the gathering night. Remember Maggie Rose. Chapter 64. I had a date to see Jessie that night, and it had kept me going with anticipation through most of the day. We met at an Embassy Suites motel in Arlington. Because of all the press in town for the trial, we were being especially cautious about being seen together. Jessie arrived at the room after I did. She looked absolutely alluring and sexy in a low-cut black tunic. She had on black-seamed stockings and high-heeled pumps. She wore red lipstick and a scarlet blush. A silver comb was set in her hair. Be still, my heart. I had a power lunch, she said by way of explanation. She kicked off her high heels. Do I make the social register or not? Well, you're definitely having a positive effect on my social register. I'll just be a minute, Alex. 1 minute. Jessie disappeared into the bathroom. She peeked out of the bathroom after a few minutes. I was on the bed. The tension in my body was draining into the mattress. Life was good again. Let's take a bath, okay? Wash away the road dust, Jessie said. That's not dust, I said to her. That's just me. I got up and went into the bathroom. The tub was square and unusually large. There was a lot of gleaming white and blue tile, all mounted a foot or so higher than the rest of the bathroom. Jessie's fancy clothes were strewn on the floor. You in a hurry? I asked her. Yep. Jessie had filled the tub to the brim. A few independent-minded soap bubbles floated up and popped against the ceiling. Wisps of steam rose steadily. The room smelled like a country garden. She stirred the bath water with her fingertips. Then she came over to me. She still had the silver comb in her hair. I'm a little wired, she said. I could tell. I can tell about these things. I think it might be time for a little healing. We went for it. Jessie's hands played with the buttons on my trousers, then the zipper. Our mouths came together, lightly at first, then hard. Suddenly, Jessie took me inside her as we stood beside the steamy tub. Just 2 or 3 quick strokes, then she moved away from me again. Her face, neck, and chest were flushed. For a moment, I thought something was wrong. I was caught by surprise, shock, pleasure entering her, then parting so quickly. She was wired, almost violent. What was that all about? I asked. I'm going to have a heart attack, Jessie whispered. Better figure out a story for the police. Phew, Alex. She took my hand and pulled me into the tub. The water was warm, just right. So was everything else. We started to laugh. I still had my underwear on, but Pete was poking and peeking around. I pulled off the shorts. We maneuvered in the tub until we were facing each other. Jessie got on top of me somehow. We were unwilling to give up any contact. Jessie leaned way back. She braced her hands behind her head. She watched my face with curious fascination. The red on her neck and chest was getting deeper. Her long legs suddenly lifted straight out of the water and hooked around my head. Jessie jerked forward a couple of times, then both of us exploded. Her body went stiff. We thrashed and moaned a lot. Waves of water splashed from the tub. Somehow, Jessie got her arms around me. Her arms and her legs. I settled back in water just under my nose. Then I went under. Jessie was on top of me. The feeling of being close to climax rushed through my body. We were both coming. I was also going to drown. I heard Jessie yell again, a strange water-muffled sound above the surface. I climaxed as I was about to run out of air. I swallowed water and coughed. Jessie rescued me. She pulled me up and took my face in both her hands. Release. Blessed release. We stayed there holding each other. Spent, as they used to say in gentler times. There was more water on the floor than in the bathtub. All I knew right then was that I was falling deeper and deeper in love. That much I was sure about. The rest of my life was mystery and chaos, but at least there was a lifeline. there was Jessie. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, I had to leave to go home. That way I would be there when the kids got up. Jessie understood. After the trial, we were going to sort everything out a lot better. Jessie wanted to get to know Janny and Damon. It had to be done just right, we agreed. "I miss you already," she said as I got ready to go. "Damn, don't go. I know you have to go." She took the silver comb out of her hair and pressed it into my hand. I went out into the night with her voice still in my head. At first there was nothing but the pitch darkness of the parking lot. Suddenly, 2 men stepped out in front of me. I automatically reached for my shoulder holster. One of them switched on a glaring light. The other had a camera aimed at my face. The press had found me and Jessie. Oh, shit. The kidnapping was so big that everything around it was a story. It had been like that from the start. A young woman trailed along behind the 2 men. She had long, frizzy black hair. She looked like part of a movie crew from New York or L.A. "Detective Alex Cross?" one of the men asked. Meanwhile, his partner took several rapid shots with the camera. The flashes lit up the dark parking lot. "We're from the National Star. We want to talk to you, Detective Cross." I picked up a British accent. The National Star was an American tabloid based in Miami. "What does this have to do with anything that's happened?" I said to the Brit. I was fingering Jessie's silver comb in my pocket. "This is private. This isn't news. This isn't anybody else's business." "That's our job to decide," he said. "I don't know, though, mate. Major communications breakthrough between the D.C. police and the Secret Service. Secret talks and whatever." The woman was already knocking at the motel door. Her voice was as loud as the metallic rapping. "This is the National Star," she announced. "Don't come out," I shouted to Jessie. The door opened, and Jessie stood there fully dressed. She stared at the frizzy-haired woman and didn't bother to conceal her contempt. "This must be a really proud moment," she said to the reporter. "This is probably as close as you'll ever get to a Pulitzer." "Nah," the reporter had a comeback. "I know Roxanne Pulitzer. And now I know you too." Chapter 65. I played a medley of Keith Sweat, Belle Biv DeVoe, Hammer, and Public Enemy pop songs on the piano. I stayed out on the porch entertaining Damon and Janelle until about 8 that morning. It was Wednesday of the week Jessie and I had gotten our little lurid surprise in Arlington. Nana was in the kitchen reading a hot copy of National Star, which I had bought for her at Acme. I waited for her to call me inside. When she didn't, I got up from my pumping piano and went to face her music. I told Damon and Janelle to stay put. Just stay the way you are. Don't ever change. Just like on any other morning, Nana was sipping tea. The remains of her poached egg and toast were still in evidence. The tabloid was casually folded over on the kitchen table. Read? Unread? I couldn't tell from her face, or the condition of the newspaper. "You read the story?" I had to ask. "Well, I read enough to get the gist of it. Saw your picture on the front page, too," she said to me. "I believe that's how people read that kind of paper. I always used to be surprised. People buying a paper like that on Sunday morning after church." I sat down across from her at the breakfast table. A wave of powerful old feelings and memories came rushing over me. I recalled so many talks like this one in our collective past. Nana took up a little crust of toast. She dipped it in marmalade. If birds could eat like humans, they would eat like Nana Mama. She is quite a piece of work. She's a beautiful, and I'm sure a very interesting white woman. You're a very handsome black man, sometimes with a good head on your shoulders. A lot of people don't like that idea, that picture. You're not too surprised.